Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Brian and Pete podcast. Pete is out there somewhere in the world being awesome. Actually, I got a voice note from him, so I know where he is, but he's out there being awesome. And I'm excited today to spend some time having a conversation with, I'm not joking, Adrian, the most surprising, positively surprising conversation meeting that I have had in the last decade. Now,
Wow.
yeah. So we're going to be talking with Adrian Armstrong from the Scottish Bible Society. Now, okay, please don't be insulted. Don't be insulted by what I'm about to say. But I get a lot of email requests for meetings from people that I don't know, and and from a wide variety of ministries. And honestly, we won't tell anybody, but I try and dodge as many
Yeah.
as I can because
Yeah.
I just there's no way I can do them all. Um, but you emailed and I'm like, okay, Adrian, Scottish Bibles, okay, and I can't remember, but I probably tried to dodge it or delay it or something at that time, not knowing you or whatever. And then it just ended up being one of those that kept being on the top, and then we sat down for a coffee at Epicure's for a relative, for an hour, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, here we go again. I know how these meetings go. I know how they go, and it's like, okay, I want a vision cast word. Adrian, that hour lit me up. Like I
Wow.
was so blown away by our chat together. I was so impacted and so like I felt like I found someone who has such a similar heart and a ministry, and I didn't even know you existed. And I was like such a wonderful, powerful hour about a year
Mhm.
ago,
Mhm.
and I've been thinking about it ever since. So yeah, the number one surprise meeting of the last decade, or maybe ever. So I'm so glad that you agreed to be on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, and thanks for your welcome. And for me too, I remember that meeting so well, and for me it was a highlight. As you say, finding someone that you didn't know existed, and you shared so much love of the same things. It was just an incredible meeting, and I remember I had another meeting afterwards, and I was sitting there thinking, I was almost crying, thinking I've got to leave this meeting to go to another meeting,
Mm,
as
yeah.
often is the case, and you're thinking. And you felt you could have talked all day. It was just great. So great, and great to be chatting again today. So thank you for the invite to be with you.
Yeah, honestly, that's why I wanted you on the podcast, just because I wanted to have another conversation. And you live on the other side of the island, right? You
Yeah.
live at was it the east end of Glasgow, which some people call Edinburgh, and and we and so very convenient. I'm glad you're able to be here. So I do have some questions
Yeah.
based on our
Hmm.
last meeting because it was rushed,
Yeah.
and there was so
Yeah.
much that we didn't get to. But
Hmm.
like, I want to know more about you and your backstory because somehow there's a journey here between you and then deciding to work as a profession in like Bible in the Scottish Bible Society.
Yeah.
Who are you? Where how did we get here? What was your journey with this story?
Well, I think one of the shared backgrounds for us both. I think we both have connections with the Brethren. Uh,
Yes.
so so I grew up here in Edinburgh. I'm an Edinburgh lad. I went to university here, but all my life, apart from 4 years I spent in Canada, have been at the same church on a corner of a street in Edinburgh, where my grandparents went, my parents went, where I go, where my kids now go, which is a Brethren church, and at the heart of that was the Bible.
Yes.
Um, but of course, as you're going through life and choosing what to do, the great thing about Brethren is, we didn't traditionally have people who were paid to work with the church, but
Mhm.
everybody used their gifts. So, in what was quite a small church with not too many other young people, I think there was my brother, my cousin, and a couple of other guys. Um, you're trying to find your way, and you're very quickly encouraged to get involved in things. Um, so looking back, it's interesting in seeing how do you get to where you are? So I went to university here. I studied business and law, then followed that with a law degree and went into banking. Um, and was still all the time doing that. So I'd begun to preach in my late teens. I'd been involved in the Christian Union at university. So all these great opportunities for ministry. But of course, my model was you did your job and you did ministry alongside that. It's a great model, and we're all called to use our gifts. Um, but when I'd been working for banking for quite a while, and I was preaching a lot of different churches, God really began to speak to me about leaving that and getting some formal theological education for what I didn't know. I had no idea where that was going to go. And I remember preaching at a number of churches week after week, and people would come up and say, "Hey, you've got a great gift of the Bible, Adrian, a great gift of preaching. What are you going to do with that?" And I'm thinking to myself, "Well, I've just preached at your church. What does it look like I'm doing?" And you're thinking, that's what I thought it was. And it just kept coming. People saying, "What are you going to do with your gift?" And so I made this radical decision to leave my career, which I'd aimed towards in banking, left it. And I
Wow.
still remember sitting in the tarmac on a plane in Glasgow airport, ready to fly out the country to Canada, where I literally knew nobody, to go to a Bible college I'd visited once, and thinking to myself, "Oh, Adrian, what on earth have you done?" But I can't tell you what happened in that moment in life, Brian. When you say yes to Jesus, when you accept the fact that he's calling you away from what you're doing to where he wants you to be, and you don't know what that looks like, and he just opens a door that is just so life-giving. And for me, the 4 years that I spent in Canada, I met my wife there. She's Scottish. She was also there studying. So that sense of learning together and having that shared background together, that's been important for us. So I did some years there. I came back, had some years in commerce again. We had a young family, and you're trying to work out, what do you do next? And the question kept coming. And then this job at the Scottish Bible Society came up, and it just seemed perfect. It just seemed perfect. I've talked for a long time there. You perhaps have some questions within that, Brian.
I marvel at our stories, and this is one of the things about our connect before that I just was so surprised by. Yeah, the great impact of our brother and backgrounds, and just the love that uh, environment instilled in the Bible, the place of the Bible. It just,
Yeah.
as a young guy growing up. In fact, actually, this summer, I'm going to be working at a Brethren Bible camp in Washington State for a bit, serving at this
Wow.
place that had
Wow.
such a huge impact for me. And I go and I teach there often in the summers, but I'm just going to serve the summer staff. Like I have such a gratitude for that the power of that Bible background from the brothers, and also my wife and I studied Bible together,
Yeah.
in and just that togetherness.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. I'm just yeah. So
Yeah.
when you made that first step to go to get on the plane,
Mhm.
are you like 20, or where are you at when
Oh,
you
I'm
make
I'm
this
I'm I'm
shift?
30 at this
You're
point.
so
I'm
you're making a massive
yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
Uh,
Huge jump.
and then
And it was
when you made the shift to go again into the Bible Society out of banking a second time?
Yeah, so when I've been at Bible Society 11 years this year, and I'm
Wow,
53, so that
wow,
means I was 42, probably, if my maths is right. There was a
yeah.
reason I left the bank. My numbers aren't great. But yeah, so I'm in my 40s before I do that.
Yeah.
And I think you look at how God takes you, and sometimes I look back in my life and think, was I deaf to Jesus earlier? Was I just really,
Mm,
really resistant to his call? I mean,
yeah.
I look back. I mean, Christian Union at university was hugely important to me. I suddenly met, having gone from a small church to this huge group of Christians. When I was at Edinburgh University and in the Christian Union there, it was 400 strong, Brian, 400 Christian students
Wow.
meeting every Friday. And 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 the sense of mission, people coming to faith, a really vibrant time. And I got into leadership there, was given amazing opportunities, had great mentors within that period. And I look back, and so many of our group there, are now leading in churches around the world. Some of them are still some of the most gifted evangelists I've ever met. You look back at that as a formative time in your student years, and yet still I chose to go into banking rather than pursue. And I look back sometimes and think, could I get onto this a little bit earlier? Should I?
Mm.
And sometimes we do that in life and look back and think, was God just being very patient with a very stubborn young man? And
Yeah,
or
that's a
but then
that's a
we trust, of
good.
course, in the sovereignty of God, and the scriptures tell us this, that God's timing is perfect. My
Mhm.
mom always used to say to me, Adrian, God is never late.
Mm.
And I love that. I love that. The
Yeah.
sense so often in our lives that we're wondering, we're questioning what's happening, but God's timing and His sovereignty over our lives is perfect. And so, most of the time, I just try to have a contentment and a joy and amazement at what it is that God is doing in my life, what He's done through Jesus, and and where He's brought me to. I mean, the job I get to do in Bible engagement around Scotland. I get to chat to leaders every day. I get to work with the Bible, trying to produce innovative resources that help people in the church and outside the church get into the Bible, and then connecting with a wider fellowship of Bible societies around the world, um, and just hearing what God does through the Word of God and how He changes people, how He changes cities, how He changes nations, how He's changing the world through it. Um, that's staggering to me that I get to do this as a job. It's such a joy.
It's an interesting thought. Like looking back, I'm not really a super looking back person. I'm a follow forward. Wherever I'm at, I'm
Yeah.
going to follow forward. But it is really interesting to look back and be like, well, did I, the choices that I made back then, and I'm happy for where I am now. But just such a deep thought. 11 years ago, though,
Mhm.
you were when you got the opportunity, something must have been going on, maybe some sort of holy agitation or
Oh,
some
oh, 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 yeah. I mean, we'd come
discontentment.
back when I
Yeah.
first came back. When I was coming back, so Karen and I had met. We got married. So we were married, and I was finishing off my second masters, and I had place at St Andrews University to go and do a doctorate. I wanted to teach, so that's
Okay.
that's what I would. I love the Bible so much. I want to do this full time
I
at
understand.
university. Um, so I had funding. Karen's expecting our first child. We're sitting at September. Our landlady had this beautiful cottage up on the Sunshine Coast among islands. There's orcas going past. It's idyllic. Everything's going fine. And then I get a phone call from home to say that my funding had fallen through
Oh,
and that I wasn't going to be able to do my doctorate. And that was,
whoa.
we're couple of months away from having our first child. So here I am. Left banking. I've invested my entire life and a lot of money, all my money, in pursuing this.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going on to do more theological education and take that route. And God just closed the door. God
Huh.
just closed the door. And then I ended up thinking, well, I've got to earn a living. So I end up back in commerce. So I end up back in commerce here, for about 7 years. And through those years, you're sitting. I love business. My dad was in business. One of the reasons I ended up going that route is that was a family business. Round the table, around dinner time, there was two things. There were two family businesses. One was the business, the car business, which is my dad's business. The second was this business of Jesus, the kingdom of heaven. So those are the two businesses in the family. And so I followed that. And yet here I was. We're sitting there thinking, well, what next? So you go back to commerce and you're asking the question, Lord, why did I give up banking? Why did I go and get this theological education? How are you going to use this? I'm looking for those opportunities. And I remember one particular moment. I was sitting reading in the morning, and I just put my face into the carpet and I was crying my eyes out because there was a sense of I don't think I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I think you have something for me, and I don't know what it is yet, and it involves the Bible. And I've given myself to this, Lord, and I'm just waiting for you. And in many ways, I'm sitting there going, Lord, I'm tired of waiting. And I'm crying my eyes out. And I heard not an audible voice. And I said, "What? You just tell me what you want me to do." And I got this sense from the Spirit saying to me, "Well, what do you want to do?" And so I prayed and I got up and I wrote three things in my journal. I wrote Bible,
Mm.
people, the church in Scotland.
Wow.
And he said, "That's what you want to do." And I went, yes, Jesus, that's more than anything. That is my heart. I mean, I came back to Scotland for a reason. There was many opportunities in North America, but my heart longs for our nation here. And I remember as a student cycling up every morning to Arthur's Seat and watching the lights go on in the city and praying that as lights went on, Jesus would enter those homes, those halls. So Scotland was in my heart. And literally, that was a Friday. Literally the Monday morning, I see this advert for this job in Scottish Bible Society. And the three big things that came out to me were Bible, people, and the church in Scotland. Now, at this point, it had been a busy weekend. We had young kids. I hadn't quite said to my wife, oh, I hadn't told you. I ran through with the advert through to her and said, look at this, look at this. And you could see I was excited, couldn't get why I was quite excited. And I said, oh, yeah, we haven't had time to chat about the crying into the carpet thing yet. And
Wow.
she said, oh, wow, yeah.
Well, I feel, I mean, I shave my head, as you can see on the stream, but I feel like the hair on my head is, the back of my neck is trying to stand up. The non-existent hair on the back of my, that is amazing. That's so powerful. And
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. But that's 7 years waiting.
Yeah.
And again, you see, and in that waiting time, and we often think that when we're waiting for the Lord that he is inactive. He's not. He has to work in us to get us to a place where we're ready for what is next. And I often find in my life I think I'm far more ready than the Lord thinks. So I got to wait. but but
Everybody does. I think everybody thinks themselves one stage further than where
yeah,
they really are. Yeah.
yeah. But of course, when you have to wait for something, it means all the more. I mean, Karen and I we were 33 when we were married. We had to wait for that.
Yeah.
So our marriage and that gift of marriage is so precious. You know, I had to wait for that experience of theological education, and it was transformative. But it means so much because of that. And I had to wait for this role in which I look and say the Lord had been preparing for me that since childhood. Um, and I had to wait for that, for the right moment. And I think the longer you wait for things, the Lord refines your longings of your heart. And all the way, I was speaking to people last night at church, and I was saying, you know, so much of my life, you grow up with things that you long for. And there's a lot of stuff in the world which is wonderful that you long for. But the older I get, the more I realize that all my longings are really being refined. So I long for one thing and one thing only, and it's the Lord Jesus Christ. Um, and sometimes you just need to get to that point when you're actually having to be honest about where your heart is and the things that you're longing for. And you get to that moment where, you know, this is Psalm 36, and it says, you know, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And I used to think as a teenager that meant be a good Christian and Jesus will give you everything you want.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the way it works.
Yeah.
Find out who the Lord has made you to be. Find out your calling in life, the gift, just that amazing place. And is it Frederick Buechner has that line about calling in life, that he says that your place of calling is where your great longing meets the world's deep need.
Mm.
My great longing was for the Bible all my life. It's been the Bible. And we have a deep need in this nation. We have a deep need in this world for the Bible, for the living Word of God. So yeah, I had to wait,
Wow.
but you
I'm
value
having
the
these.
things you wait for.
I'm having this weird sensation of this water stuff coming out of my eyes. It's so good. One of the things that just stunned me, I didn't even know when we sat down together a year ago, was this passion that you have and the Scottish Bible Society has, and that I've had for years and years and years, of cover to cover Bible reading. And
Yeah,
I'm sitting there, we're sitting there conversing, and I'm like, this is my background, and you know, since 2003, and cover to cover Bible reading, we're doing this in the church,
yeah,
and you're like, that's what we're trying to do. What that was such a moment for me, you know, finding, you know, this co-passion for just reading the Bible to cover. Where does this come from, and from you, and what's going on with what Scottish Bible Society is trying to do with this?
yeah. Well, I suppose in my own journey, I can think of a couple of moments. One was when in my student years, I went to, there was a particular spring harvest that was kind of one word alive, and they did Bible overview, and suddenly the whole picture of the Bible came to life. That
Hmm.
happened when I was at Bible college as well. And when I joined the Scottish Bible Society in 2014, they just launched the resource with Biblica, the publishers of the NIV, called Community Bible Experience. And it was a really simple idea. The idea was that you read large amounts of the Bible every day, so not just little bits. So they're saying, it's a meal of the Bible rather than Bible McNuggets, and the sense that if you read the large amounts together, you get a different sensation from the Bible. You get a picture of where the story is going.
Yeah.
So that this plan that they launched, and the first one, the New Testament that they launched, was 8-week reading plan. You read right through the New Testament. You
Whoa,
read
whoa,
about
whoa. 8
20,
weeks.
8 weeks,
8 weeks.
8 weeks,
The entirety of the
the
New Testament.
the entire New
Boom.
Testament. And the idea is read Monday to Friday, Saturday and Sunday to catch up because you probably need that, sort of depending what your pacing is. And then having read these large amounts, you get together with people to discuss it. That's also key. To discuss our questions about the Bible is so important. I know that that's a huge part of your model too.
Yeah.
And that you come together and you ask 5 simple questions about what you've read. The first of which is always, what did you notice for the first time? And that sense that as we read large amounts of the Bible, as we read through the Gospels, they've changed the order in this book. So you begin with Luke and Acts. You get the story of Jesus in Luke, then the second book of Luke, which is Acts, the story of the church that's birthed through Jesus. So you're getting this sense of where the story goes. And this is an amazing resource. So over the years that it was available, and they stopped publishing it sadly, 7,500 people in Scotland used this to read right through the New Testament. And there
In
was
eight
people
weeks. In eight
in
weeks.
8 weeks. Yeah, I mean, some
Wow.
of them put it to 16 weeks. Some of them rolled out a little bit later. And then what happened? There was other volumes that were launched. There was one Covenant History, which went Genesis to Kings, and there's a couple of other volumes as well. And we got to a point. This is a worldwide resource. This is really interesting. Worldwide resource. And the last one, which was the wisdom literature, they hadn't published yet because there wasn't demand. And there were so many people in Scotland who had read all the way through the Bible in this format and were longing for the last little bit. The Biblica helped us publish a special edition of the wisdom literature. So I was able to write an article, Scotland Leads the Way in Bible Reading Around the World, which was a
Oh,
great moment.
wow. When was
But
that? When did you write that?
so that would have been way back in about 2016 to 2017, I think. That was about then. I'd need to look back and we can stop foggy on the dates. But what was amazing to me, Brian, was, when I met with you, we just recently republished this because what happens so often with, Biblica had to stop producing this. And part of it was lack of demand from churches around the world. Yet I'd see how transformational this was to churches, to individuals. I remember one letter from a lady who said she'd been in church all her life and she'd learned more from the introductions. So that's these little introductions to each book. Who was Luke? What was he writing? So and reading through this community Bible experience in 8 weeks, she'd learn more about the Bible and the Lord Jesus Christ than a lifetime in church. Now, on the one hand, that was incredibly sad. How can you be in church that long and hear the Bible and not love it, not grasp it? And yet, in those 8 weeks, that had transformed her life. We heard from churches. There was a church in Stirling. They decided to do this as an outreach. We're just going to book out a local coffee shop, and we are going to invite people from the community to come and read the Bible. There were so many people wanted to come that they had to book a bigger venue. And this is, one of the things that's happening in Scotland. It is coinciding with a time of growth and interest in the Bible. So I sat down with you, and we've been trying to do this, and they'd stopped publishing it. And we just had to republish it. And I'm going out and feeling, gosh, I'm starting the journey again, going to church leaders and saying, have you heard about this? Have you tried this? And you said, oh, yeah, we've been doing that for 20 years. And
Yeah.
that's our model. That's our
Yeah.
Bible read through groups. And we do this. And I just wanted to weep, Brian, when you told me that, because I
Hmm.
had heard about your church. I'd heard about how you were growing. I was heard about the people coming to faith. And everything I'd learned from Community Bible Experience, everything we'd seen from this resource, you'd been living it out, not just for the years that we've been doing the but for decades. And it was the heart of your church. And it was just such a wonderful moment of recognition of this works and God is using it. It was such a joy.
It's powerful, and I think I love the idea of pushing people big chunks because you're
Yeah.
right. You see things. If you're only reading bit by bit, you're missing a lot of the arcs and a lot of the mega themes.
Hmm.
I even encourage people spend a few hours, just read Genesis in one sitting. Just
Yeah.
like the whole, get the book. Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
read it all at once. It's amazing how things come. But yeah, the pushing people from the beginning. I mean, you can imagine I get
Hmm.
feedback on
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
on things. And sometimes the feedback is, oh, we're reading too much. If you would
Hmm.
just slow down the reading pace, then more
Hmm.
people would do it. But I've
Yeah.
decided that that's actually not true. And
Hmm.
actually, more people are invigorated by the challenge, the high bar, and rising
Hmm.
up. People who can't do the high bar also can't seem to do the low bar very much
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's all about this one little thing called setting aside the time to do it. And
Yeah.
if you're not able to set aside time, then and it's really not that challenging. Yeah. So and again, our testimonies are just like people's lives are transformed.
Yes. Yeah.
I have been doing this, and you talked about my story of getting into that cover to cover Bible reading, and just how personally it shapes
Hmm.
anything. In fact, actually, like a long time ago, Adrian, I had a local pastor around here, a couple local pastors. I mean, we're talking like 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
let's do this Bible cover to cover Bible reading.
Yeah.
And one of the guys, after a few weeks,
Hmm.
was like, man, this makes preaching so much easier. Just, yeah, reading the Bible, huh? Yeah, that's,
So- but but it's staggering, isn't
yeah.
it? And that is a thing I come across all the time, and I come across about busy pastors and leaders who are
Mhm.
trying to do so much, and the question is, are you spending that time in the scriptures? And then, of
Yeah.
course, if they're struggling to do that, how are our people going to have that enthusiasm? And of course, I remember speaking to you about the stats that are out there from the Transforming Scotland research. If you take 7 Christians in Scotland, so this is people who are say they're Christians and they go to church. If you take 7 Christians, just 1 in 7 will read the Bible every day. And then by the time, but weekly Bible reading, another 2 will join them. So just 3 out of 7 Christians in church read the Bible between Sundays.
Mm.
That now, you and I have this shared love of the Bible, knowing that to hear the Father's voice, to hear God speak to us into our lives is the most powerful thing from the scriptures. And it's an amazing gift. It's a gift that so many people around the world don't have because it's not in their language or they can't afford a Bible. We've got it.
Mhm.
And we've got this heritage of it in this nation, and yet we have neglected that. And the interesting thing is when we talk to people and say, okay, reading the Bible is a struggle, they say, I'm struggling to do this. They want to do it. And I think one of the things as leaders we need to do is be creative and find ways to help people do that.
Mhm.
And find new ways to enable people to get into the Bible. And of course, as people do that, as they discover the Bible themselves, that then it overflows from their life. It's not just preaching that comes easier
Yeah.
when we're reading the Bible. It's everything. And that overflow of spending time with God and hearing Him speak into our lives comes out in our lives in the conversations we have with our friends, with our family, with our neighbors, that the words of God, these words of life, should come out in conversation as we reach out to others.
I've been showing people your like the New Testament one that
Yeah.
where it's all
Hmm.
mapped out, and it's
Yeah.
great. It's much more book oriented, like if
Yeah.
and it's set aside by like reading plans and like an
Hmm.
introduction, but in like you said, in a different order,
Hmm.
and so very palatable. We've been talking. I think one of the conversations that we have at our church, and I'm sure other people do as
Hmm.
well, is what do you do with people after Alpha? So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
go through Alpha and they're getting to know God, and then maybe they do it again, if that's an option in your church where you're doing it several times. But we've been talking, okay, well, what if we run them through this 8 week kind of New Testament reading overview, keeping in the same
Yeah.
groups and just kind of
Yeah.
it's because it's when people are hungry, and I think the Holy Spirit confirms this
Yeah.
when I put out that challenge, like read the Bible with me, or like read the
Hmm.
Bible in this group. I think it's something that I think believers feel like, oh, that would be a good idea.
And
It's And I'll tell you, like my background is that before I started Bible read through groups, I started them because I kept failing. Like I
Ah,
didn't
yeah.
have the self-discipline. I'd be one of those stats
Mhm.
of like, yeah, I love the Bible. I
Yeah.
studied the
Yeah.
Bible. I went to seminary. I'm in
Mhm.
ministry. And yet like the self-discipline of just going through the Bible, I needed
Mhm.
a light accountability, like people to do it with and to meet with. And just I don't need more guilt in my life or more failure in my life, but just
Mhm.
that idea of having a group that would be like to discuss what we read, game
Yeah.
changer, life changer, and just kind of that tool that I needed. And so, I'm hearing, oh, you've built the
Yeah.
same tool to help with groups and stuff.
Yeah.
So powerful. Can I just ask you about that
Yeah.
article that you wrote about
Yeah.
Scotland leading the way? And by
Yeah.
like you dropped that out there, and I'm like, wait, what is that true? Was that true? I mean, what
Well,
is that?
it was true in the sense that this is a resource that had gone global. So Biblica owned the
Hmm.
copyright for the NIV. They'd launched Bible Experience around the world. They'd launched it with Philip Yancey. Okay, so a
Hmm.
big name.
Yeah.
And Philip was great in supporting this resource, and it had gone around the world. And of course, they produced the New Testament first, and then it was Genesis to Kings. Interestingly, in Scotland, our experience was that people loved the New Testament. When it came to the Old Testament, they ran to a halt
Mm.
because for so many people in church, let alone outside of church, the Old Testament is unfamiliar, and
Yeah.
so people just hear the New Testament preached. And so when they were picking up the Old Testament, they were reading through Genesis, they got to about Numbers, Leviticus, and they just ground to a halt. But lots of other people went forward. And so they hadn't even published this last volume, which was the wisdom literature, in this format to enable people to complete the whole Bible. That's your whole Bible read through in 8-week chunks. And again, when it came to Old Testament, that's when people started taking the lever off the 8 weeks. They said, we need more time because
Mm.
it's less familiar to us. And there's flexibility in this,
Sure, sure.
it's within it. So in that sense, we were leading the world in Bible reading because no other nation, no other country had said that they were going to needing this resource. And yet we had requests coming in from people saying, please, when are we going to get the last part of the Bible that we can read? And in many ways, that's a reflection of our work of Bible translation around the world.
Mm.
The sense that of the 7,500 languages around the world, you're still less than 600 languages. No, you think we came coming close to about 700. So about 10% of the world's languages have the full Bible.
Mm.
That's
Wow.
it.
Wow.
And there's a whole bunch of countries that maybe just have the New Testament or just have a gospel. And you say to yourself, wow, that is the reality for Christians around the world. They do not have the Old Testament in their own language. They don't have most of the New Testament in their own language. Um, and here was a sense of Bible hunger and what is real Bible poverty in Scotland. People saying, we're wanting the Bible to be completed in this format so that we can read it right through. So that was an amazing moment. So yeah, I mean, we weren't leading the world in Bible reading.
No,
We're
I
we're
love this.
struggling,
I
but
love this. That should be republished in front page. That's
yeah,
exciting. Now, Adrian, we have a challenge because you and I get so excited about all this stuff. We
uh,
could talk forever. I want to talk about some other things as well here. But
I'm
if people want to, okay, let's say somebody's listening and they want to be a part of a group. Are
yeah.
there groups that they can, or if they want to start groups, like what's the flow there?
Yeah, well, get in contact with me. Look up the Scottish Bible Society, scottishbiblesociety.org. Look up our website. Look for, we've rebadged what was called Community Bible Experience, and we're calling it Love, Death, and Resurrection.
Oh yeah.
The story of Jesus and the world, his church and the world he came to save. That's a subtitle. So you'll see that on our website, probably front and center. And you'll see my email there. It's a contact slip. Get in touch with me and we can talk about that. I love nothing better than phone calls or sitting down for a coffee with people and saying, listen, how can we start this where we are? And of course, because so many people have done this, we have experience of churches doing this, big churches, small churches, doing it as a whole church program, doing it within our small groups, and doing it as outreach. That's one of the big things we're seeing. We're just saying to people, there is hunger in our world, in our society. People want to read the Bible, but they pick it up and it looks like a dictionary. This is a format without double columns, without chapter under the verses. Looks like a book, smells like a book, and reads like a book. So get in touch and have a look. Order a copy and look at it. And there's a reading plan. There's a bookmark will come with that, telling you how to do that in 8 weeks. We've got other reading plans as well. But we'd love people to start that. But particularly the idea of saying, start a Bible book group in your community. Use this as outreach. Say to
Mhm.
your community and open up the invitation. Have you ever wanted to read the Bible, the best-selling book ever? Do you want to know more about Jesus? Everyone's fascinated with Jesus. Um, and what we're experiencing in Scotland at the moment, Brian, is just extraordinary. I quoted the stats to you last year. We've just got all this research finally in, and we're having a look at that for Scotland. 18 to 24-year-olds in Scotland, 1 in 4 say they read the Bible at least once a month. Now, we've got nothing like those numbers in our churches, so there's people out there, and they're picking up the Bible. I was with a church leader last week down in the Scottish borders, and he said he'd had a young mum came in, and she'd started to read the Bible because she'd watched The Chosen, this online movie
Oh,
about
wow.
Jesus' life, and
Yeah.
she came in and she came to faith, was baptized. Another young guy had been watching YouTube videos during COVID. He'd come to faith online through doing that and then picking up a Bible and reading it. Um, Stories like that used to be I'd hear from around the world, but they're no longer unusual in Scotland. Our young people are hungry for answers to the pain in their life, to the big questions they have, and it's reaching across the generations. But it's the young generation, the under 35s, which are really leading it. And I mean, you're seeing that where you are, Brian, in your church.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. I've had, even for the last 20 years, it's so much easier to get non Christians or early Christians to
Yeah,
they want to read the Bible. It's the ones that have been around church for a long time. They're like, nah, yeah, don't, too big. Where
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
oh, come
yeah,
on. And so I love that. Like, there is a hunger out there for people that aren't even in the church
yeah,
to want to read it. I mean, I love what I wrote down, asking, the community, do you want to read the Bible? I mean, because
yeah,
there is a real, yikes, Adrian. That's
yeah,
that's exciting
yeah.
stuff.
But here's another story. So I had a phone call just before Christmas. A chap had seen Love, Death, and Resurrection. He's up in the sort of Angus Glens area, and he said, just challenging me, does this work? Is this real? Are there any other people doing this? And I said, yeah, this works. This is real. So he says, because we're inviting friends along, who don't know Jesus, and friends, some Christians who to come along as well. And we've booked the local library. The local library was allowing them to have this Bible read through group, community Bible experience,
Like
this
a book
Bible
club
book
for the
group.
Bible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the local library,
Wow.
and it was staggering. And they had people, coming to that group and didn't have faith, and they loved it. And he's got great stories coming out of that. Someone coming to faith through that, just through that invitation, come and read the Bible. As they did that, they discovered the Lord Jesus Christ. We have an open door in our country at the moment, just in this most amazing opportunity. Something has happened and shifted since COVID, particularly. Um, I track newspaper articles about stories of people coming back to church, stories of conversion, and people exploring faith. And I've never seen an Easter weekend in UK papers like we have just had. You
Hmm.
could not move for stories of coming back to church, of people exploring faith and people coming to faith. And when the newspapers are picking it up, it's because there's a story out there. And this is one of the big story that's happening. Um, and of course, it's hard because so many of us have lived through a period of decline and of stagnation in the Scottish Church. But I speak to church leaders every day up and down the country who are seeing trickles of growth coming through. Our sister Bible Society in England and Wales published a report just before Easter called The Quiet Revival.
Hmm.
The sense that we're not seeing an avalanche yet, but we're seeing a trickle coming through. But some people are seeing an avalanche of people coming to faith. And at the heart of that is people wanting to pick up the Bible, reading the Bible, and coming to faith in Jesus Christ.
Wow. I'm excited. I mean, we are seeing evidences of that, and probably for the
Yeah.
last year or so, I've
Hmm.
been like trying to inquire with pastors around Scotland, like, is this happening
Yeah.
everywhere? And now you're more exposed to that. And
Yeah.
what's your vibe about what's going on in Scotland?
Yeah, I do think that. What was unusual about last week, and I said this to the church leader I was, I always say, if you're an alien visiting from space and you can land in any of our cities, we have some extraordinary churches, and you go to churches that are vibrant and they're growing. You come to our rural areas because people are moving out of our rural areas into our cities. They're being depopulated, so that means our churches are often declining. This is a church that's growing.
Hmm.
And they're seeing people coming to faith, not in huge numbers. And so last week's conversation was like so many conversations I have with churches. I have a conversation, I chat about the Bible, and I say, listen, these are some of the things that we're hearing are happening around the country. What about you? And last week, this church leader went, yeah, okay, young people coming to faith, I'm seeing that. Um, Young guys coming to church, guys coming to church, has been a hard thing for us.
Yeah.
That's happening. Um, People coming to faith online, that's happening. People are doing that. They're almost without contact with anybody else. They're being brought to faith in Jesus Christ. Um, and then people coming back to church, coming back to a childhood faith, or they'd stopped going to church a long time ago, and now they're back. They come to vibrant faith. And then people who have been in church for a long time and have suddenly woken up to the reality of the person of Jesus Christ and have now a living faith which they've never had before. And he was able to go, I got a full house.
Hmm.
And he's a small
Amen.
church in the Scottish borders in a rural areas. Now, day after day, I'm hearing these stories. And one of the things that Pete has done, just amazingly, in gathering churches for prayer and church leaders for prayer, Pete has done an amazing job of just saying to people, tell the stories. Tell the stories. That's what you're doing in this podcast.
Hmm.
Tell the stories of what the Lord is doing in this generation. This is not a country far away. This is not us revisiting a glorious history which is long gone. This is the reality of Scotland today. And it's a vibrant move of the Holy Spirit. And many of us, of course, are just waking up to this. And as I say, it's hard to hear that when so many people are experiencing decline, when so many people are having to close churches, when we're seeing people not able to recruit pastors and ministers. And this, for me, is one of the really encouraging things. I mean, you chatted about the Send, that podcast there. Um, my daughter's 16 years old, and she was at just about every Send event she could get to
Hmm.
with friends going along. And I think one of the mistakes we might make as church leaders would say, hey, we've kind of always had the teens around our church. They're young, they're kind of enthusiastic. That's kind of what it means to be a young person. But I think we'd be making a mistake if we didn't realize that God is raising for us an extraordinary generation of missionally minded children and young people who are just out there with their faith and are happy about sharing it and want to bring their friends to church. I mean, something like Magnitude, the Scripture Union Festival, 1,500 young people bouncing up in a tent to music, which now I'm in my 50s, is a little bit distant for me. So my daughter comes back from that and says, hey, Dad, we got to do something about the worship in the church because it doesn't match Magnitude. They release an album. I mean, 1,500 young people, and they're bringing their friends, many of who don't have faith, and they're coming to faith. They are missional. I, we had some student leaders in with us just last week before last, and there was someone from the Fusion Student Ministry, and we were talking about living in a secular society, and she stuck her hand up and said, "No, no, 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 no. In the university, we are no longer in a secular society in Scotland because everyone's talking about God, spirituality, and faith. That might be your world, 50 plus something guys and girls, but that's not our world. Everyone's talking about it, and people are really interested. And that was amazing because I'm sitting there thinking, those are the voices we need to listen to.
Yeah. Wow.
Uh, those teens, those young people telling us this is the opportunity. And we've got a world to win for Jesus.
Mhm.
We've got a nation to recover. We're beginning to see that, and we need people. I mean, Jesus said 2,000 years ago, Brian, the fields are white unto harvest. So ask the Lord to send out workers into the harvest field, into the fields. And I speak to the different denominations, and everyone's saying the same thing. We're struggling for leaders. I go back and say, hey, that's where the Brethren model wins. We're raising leaders all the time. But there is a sense of we have a huge need for leaders at the moment. So maybe you're listening to this podcast, there's someone sitting in a bank today, or they're a teacher, or they're in insurance, or whatever. And listen, God calls people to this, all these things, because otherwise, how are we going to reach the offices, the towns, the cities where we are? But maybe there's someone listening to the podcast today and hearing something of my story, hearing something of our story, of what it is to be called from where we are, to be used by God to reach a generation. And I was saying this to our teenagers last night. We're talking about Second Thessalonians. On that invitation, that greeting from that letter is Timothy. He's a teenager. He's only joined in Acts 16. That Timothy, Paul, and Silas to Thessalonica. He's already involved in church planting. He's a teenager. And he's out there leading and planting churches. And I know some of our teens in Scotland are already doing that. You don't have to wait to your 30, as I was, you're called away, to your 40 to get called into the Bible Society work. God is calling us now. And God's calling a younger generation, and look at things like Cairn, what they're doing, and so many other training movements who are trying to get a younger generation and equip them for this. Scripture Union doing an amazing job in this in Scotland, in our schools and our young people as well. And that sense of partnership, I'm not sure if you've seen that, Brian, partnership of organizations, churches, church ministries, just getting together, Bible ministries saying, come on, we're at a moment here, let's equip a generation. But of course, I should say as well, if you're sitting here and you're 60, 70, 80, God's still calling you. It's never too late to say yes to Jesus and to step into that call to lead and be
Yeah.
involved in God's great mission. So I better let you get in a word in edgeways, Brian. Sorry, I'm just...
No, I'm just drinking it in. I mean, this is, I've been here for a couple decades and
Mhm.
praying for
Yeah,
reawakening, praying for
yeah.
revival, and it's just amazing that we get to live in a time where there is answered prayer. I mean, I think, answered prayer is a part of this. I think there's a
Yes.
lot of whys for why now. Do you have any thoughts about why now? Why this moment?
um, Talking Jesus research that was done in 2022, I think the most recent one, um, they looked at it. One of the statistics that was always been around in Scotland was the vast majority of people who are Christians in Scotland today, they came to faith before they were 19.
Hmm.
So in their before their teens. And beyond that, it's much harder. So they asked the question of people who had come to faith later in life, what is it that moved you towards faith? And the big thing for adults coming to faith was a life change. So you get married, you change job, someone dies, you go through grief, you go through a relationship breakup, you lose a job, life changes come along. And Rachel Jordan Wolfe, who is of Hope Together, she was talking about this research and heard her sort of saying, 2020 was a life event for the whole world. It was COVID. And I think we've seen an acceleration since then. I would discern this and say, for so many of us growing up, we're so competent in the West. We're in control of our world. We're wealthy, most of us, in terms of nations. We're ruling the world. We've got the sense that we've got everything. Everything's fine. Any problem that's around there, we can fix it. We're clever enough. We've got the technology. We've got the money. And then a global pandemic comes around and we are cowering in our houses. Some of us annoyed about that. Some of us fearing for our lives, losing lots of people. And suddenly something comes along which we can't deal with. Seems to me that's brought a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. For a younger generation, um, what's amazing is the latest research in Scotland shows how optimistic young people are that the world's going to get better. I think that enthusiasm and optimism of youth is amazing. This is just right across the board because we often hear terrible things about our young people. But they are activists. So, they're hearing that the world is being burned. They're hearing the whole sort of climate change thing as well. They're experiencing, you've been just doing a series in finance. In church, you were saying, for young people today, finance is really difficult. A lot of people saying, am I ever going to be able to afford a home of my own? All the certainties that were there. But they've also lived through, a lot of young people, just a lot of relationship breakdown, and they've followed the way that the world has gone in terms of this is the way to live and these are the choices you can make and you can just live. And they've seen that it's just ended in a big mess.
Hmm.
So they're asking questions. So I think COVID is massive in terms of shaking the certainties of our world and making us ask big questions. And so I would say that these are some of the big things. But ultimately, it's about timing. It's back to the questions that we're asking. This is the Lord's timing. And it
Mhm.
has been generations after generation after generation praying, faithfully holding out the word of God. I'm grateful that I grew up in a church where generations had invested themselves, that we grew up in a country that even in the moments of decline and seeing that going down, that there are people that still open up the doors of a church on a Sunday morning and they open up the Bible and said, God is real and he wants to speak into our lives. Let's pray and let's open his word. Um, we've been faithful to the Lord, a faithful remnant. And now is the time, the season, it seems, of the Lord blessing and visiting us afresh. And it's his timing.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I can ask a lot of whys. I do. I think as intelligent people we do. But I think the biggest thing is, what are we doing in response?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Let's grab the missional moment.
It makes sense hearing you talk, like why, like some of the resources that our church has been
Hmm.
thinking about and talking about after our conversation. That I
Hmm.
mean, you have that cover to cover Bible reading thing, but obviously that's not the only thing you do.
Yeah.
We talked about in our conversation how you have an aspect of the Scottish Bible Society that is for Scotland, and then a part
Hmm.
of it that is from Scotland.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
which is,
Absolutely.
so powerful. But here in some of the things that we've grabbed onto is you talked about how life change moments are good for older people, moments when they're more open to the gospel, and it
Yeah.
seems like you have several ministry hooks for life change moments, like the Bibles for Bairns. Does that still
Yeah,
exist?
yeah, it still does. So that's fresh for us. This is a 10-year project started in 2023, will run till 2033. So two generations of primary school kids this is going to impact. And it's a really simple idea. Anyone can sign up when their child is born, and on their first birthday, we will send them an infant Bible with a birthday card with their name in it. And then for the next 3 years, we'll send them resources to help them interact with that, whether that's snap cards, which pick up the pictures, whether it's books that pick up some of those themes or sticker books. And then in the fifth year, just before they go to school in Scotland, they will get their first full Bible, completely free. So for
What?
churches, this is great, but also for outreach. I mean, think of the people who have parents and tots groups around the country. The connections, the church is so well connected in our communities, and what that means. If a generation of families, we're now living with families who have not had parents or perhaps grandparents in church, they know nothing of the Bible, nothing of Jesus. What does it look like if we put into their homes a Bible? The stories of Jesus. First an infant Bible, and then a first full Bible. What is it if we invest and over 5 years keep sending this to those families? What does that do to this already hungry generation of mums and dads who are probably interested in faith? If we put Bibles into Scottish homes, and we're already up to an average of about 500 for the last 2 years. So 500, about 400 births for 2023 babies, 500 births for 2025 babies. There are 50,000 babies born in Scotland every year, I'm told, Brian. So we're hitting, what's that, 1%?
Okay.
0.1%. So
Yeah.
point one. We're not quite there yet. We've got a way to go, but it's this huge opportunity.
So we as pastors and church
Yeah.
people, we can encourage our people to sign up our friends who
Yeah,
are having
absolutely.
babies.
Yeah. Yeah. We need their consent. So what we need is contact details for the parent or guardian, as well as the child's name and birthday. They could sign up online. We've got brochures for that. Check out our website for that, scottishbiblesociety.org. Bibles for Bairns is right on the front page. And yes, so we get in contact with the parent or guardian and say, can we do this? Um, of 1,000, almost 1,000 now, Bibles sent out, I think we've had two people say no, thank you. The
Okay.
vast majority of people. It's one of the things that's come out of our research recently around the world. And it says that still, for the majority of the world, and it's certainly the case in the West and in Scotland, that most people think that some Bible for children is a good thing, that getting to know the Bible is a good thing, some sense of moral education there. So we've got an open door here with families. And of course, they're getting a free book. It's a beautiful colour book that comes into their home. And you're encouraging parents to interact with their children. One of the main reasons that kids struggle to read when they get to school is that there's no one to read with them. So by doing this, you're encouraging literacy, you're encouraging a connection between parent and child, and you're introducing Jesus. I perhaps told you the story of a family in Kilmarnock last year. I tell the story with their permission. I remember a couple of years before COVID, a church leader talking and said, and we're talking about people coming to faith through reading children's Bibles. He said, he says, this lady walked into our church, a few weeks ago, and she'd been reading to her niece. Her sister was a Christian. She wasn't. She was reading to her niece, and I said to her niece as she was putting her to bed, would you like a bedtime story? She said, yeah. What do you want me to read? Said, can you read from the Bible that Mummy reads me? So she read about Jesus, and it started this journey. She ends up in the church a few weeks later, having Googled to find out where a local church is. And she says, I think I've become a Christian through reading a Bible. She was married, and her husband wasn't a Christian, wasn't interested, wasn't coming to church at all. And they ended up having a little boy. And I remember the pastor getting in touch with me. This is just before COVID, Easter Sunday. And he says, you're never going to guess what happened. One night, the dad's at home, and he says to his son, what would you like me to read before you go to sleep? And he said, can you read me the Bible that Mummy reads me? So the dad, the same mum, reads the Bible to his own son. Has the same experience of meeting Jesus through reading a children's Bible, Brian, and comes to faith. He was baptized Easter Sunday, I think it was 2019. So that's mum and dad both came to faith through reading a Bible. What does that look like if in the towns and the villages and the cities around Scotland, these Bibles go out? What is God going to do with the 1,000 that are already out there? The seeding the ground. What does that look like when they get to primary school and they get their first full Bible, and maybe other people in the class have the Bible? Already our schools are just, so many opportunities there for people. That is still the place where, for children, they first encounter the Bible. We know that statistically, that for most children in Scotland, the first place they come across the Bible is school. What if we get ahead of that?
Yeah.
What happens in our nation?
So all people need to do is go onto the website and then sign up their friends who are having babies?
That's right. At the moment, what we do is we open the registration every year, just around October time. So if we get towards the end of this year, we'll open up registration, and then you can do actually put the details in. But right now we're saying, sign up, let us know that there's babies on the way, and then as soon as that opens, we will let you know. Because right now, we just finished registering babies born in 2024. Of course, we're now May in 2025, and the Lord we praise, babies will be born throughout this year, God willing. And so we get towards the end of the year. That's the time we want to start picking up and sort of saying, okay, we've got a 4-month period over October into the early new year, when we're saying now's the time to register. But you can register your interest now.
And churches can get brochures on this.
Yeah, we got posters, brochures. It's an amazing story. There was a lady in the Rins of Galloway, so down Dumfries and Galloway. She heard about this project, and there were no children, no young families in her church. So she went around her village and the surrounding village, because she was an old lady who knew everybody in the town. And she registered, I think, 13, 14 babies that had been born just that year. And so one of the things I'm saying to churches,
she registered them. She
registered. She spoke to them and said, "Listen, this is what we're doing. Can I have your details? Can I register them?" She knew so many of them, and she signed them all up. This one old lady, and I often say this. Our older generation often sit in church. Some of our churches around Scotland have not seen young people. They've not seen young families for years, and we're sort of saying, and they say, "What can I do?" And I say, "Well, do this. Your grandma." To half the village. They know you. You were maybe a teacher, and you taught the parents, and you were at work. You worked in the same shop as the grandparents. So you know these families, and they know you. Our older generation are so well connected. They walk down the street, they see the kids, they know the school, they know the teachers. They're right at the front of this opportunity. Find out who in your town, your village, your city, your street. And of course, for many grandparents in Scotland, this is the great longing, isn't it? My
Mm.
kids stopped going to school. I hear this every time I talk about Bibles for Parents. My kids aren't going to school, but to church anymore. And I try to reach my grandchildren. And so many people have said, "Oh, I'd like to register my grandchildren, but I'm not sure my kids are going to be okay with that." And then I'll get these amazing phone calls or these emails saying, my kid said yes to my grandkids having a Bible. What a moment. What a moment.
Yeah.
Because we've never stopped praying for the kids that have walked away or the parents that have walked away. Um, and the Lord longs for them too. So this amazing opportunity for our church families, amazing opportunities for our communities to sow this seed of the Bible, to get that into hearts and hands around Scotland. What would the Lord do with that? And of course, we're already in this moment. And perhaps this is a door that is opening. You know, we got this from the Bible Society of Australia. They had been doing this for a number of years. We thought it was a great idea. Bible Society in Northern Ireland have been doing this for a few years. They're seeing so many people registered. The first year they opened the registration, they sold out of all the Bibles that they'd printed, like almost over a weekend. Just
Wow.
incredible, just incredible. Um, so we will print all the Bibles that we need for all the children in Scotland that would have one. And it's just this, it's waiting there for you. It's literally going to have your name in it. And we got a team of volunteers that come in once a month and they wrap these Bibles and they write the name of the child and they write a birthday card to them saying happy birthday. And they send that to them. And as they send it, they pray over those Bibles and they pray for these children. And now, with some of the same volunteers, they're seeing that child that they gave a Bible to last year. They're now wrapping the gift for this year and they see the name again and they go, I remember praying for them last year. I'll pray for them again and their families. So, so again, it's a work of faith. It's a work of prayer. And there's a practical step to it. And we'd love as many churches and people around Scotland to learn about this and get involved because it's such an amazing gift to be able
Yeah.
to give to
When
people
when
around
you
Scotland.
mentioned that a year ago, I was like, no way, that's incredible. What an
Yeah.
opportunity. Now, Adrian, we could talk forever, and we gotta wrap this up. So let's pretend this is kind of the often the Brian and Pete podcast we have like listener questions. Now we won't do that today, but if you
Mhm.
do have questions for Pete, who'll be back next week. Um, Brian and Pete podcast at gmail.com. You can send in your questions there. There is a lot more that the Bible Society does. Now we don't have time to talk about them all, but when it comes to in Scotland,
Yeah.
you have the trauma healing course,
Yes.
which we're doing now at our church.
Yeah.
You what is that?
So this came out like almost 30 years ago in terms of war-torn Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic. It was church leaders coming to Bible translators and saying, listen, people have been through trauma, they've been through genocide, and they're traumatized. And we know the Bible should help, but we don't know how. So they got world-class counselors sitting alongside world-class translators, and they put together a course that is easily translated to enable people who've experienced trauma in their life to read the Bible in a way that helps them discover the healing that's available to us for the things that we've experienced through the Lord Jesus Christ. Number of years ago, church leaders were saying to us, listen, we're raising money for trauma healing in Syria, we're raising it in Iraq, but we got traumatized people here in Scotland. People have been through so much, relationship breakdown, alcoholism, addiction, poverty, so many
COVID.
things. COVID,
Yeah.
so many of these different things. Could it work here? So we had this listening exercise with church leaders. And of course, one of the big things for us as church leaders is how do we begin to open up and begin to address the pain that are in the lives of so many of us as Christians, all of us, impacted by sin, broken by it, by our own sin, by other people's sin against us. And there's so much stuff we never get to. Christian counseling is full. And we always say this is not counseling, but this is about coming together with a group um, and looking at exercises, very practical exercises, but reading the scriptures in a way that helps us understand how God can work in our lives to heal. So things like lament, discovering that we can actually complain to God and bring our pain to Him. Going through with art exercises that help us begin to in ways that we couldn't express with words, begin to record the pain that we've been through in life. And when we did this with Scottish church leaders, they just said, when can you start? We needed this
Mhm.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you'll know, Brian, as any church leader does, the needs of our churches are well beyond what we're able to deal with. It's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
Christian counselors have just wait lists for a long, long time. But what happens if we equip our churches to read the Bible together and to learn how to talk with other people, with each other, and to listen to one another and to say to them, what happened?
Yeah.
Then say, when that happened, what was the worst thing about that for you? And then say, how can I pray for you? And then come to God's word and say, this is what God says about this. Let's discover together. Um, and so this course goes out, and what happens is we train people. You can sign up for this training. We do it online. We do it in person as well. We have flexible ways of doing that to get people trained. The idea is come in pairs if you can, because if you're going to run a group like this, you're going to get tears and you're going to get moments when someone needs to step out, and you need two people to help with that. And what happens if we bring this to our churches? And more people go through this, and more people are confident to discover that not only can the Lord Jesus heal their pain as they read the Bible, but he can help them reach out to other people in pain. That rather than run away from someone when they open and say, listen, my life's a mess, I've got difficulties, can you help me? And think, well, I can't do that because I'm not a pastor, I'm a counselor. What happens if we have the confidence that we can step towards people, our brothers and sisters in our pain, those who come amongst us who don't know Jesus, and we say, listen, let's open the Bible together and let's find out what the Lord has to say about your pain and mine and how there's a path to healing. So just an amazing opportunity. And I'm so pleased, Brian, that so many from Hope are coming and training on this and you running this course.
Yeah, we sent 3 people over to Edinburgh for some stuff, and then they came back saying it was incredible. And so now we're starting it. We've been doing it now here at the church.
Fantastic.
Powerful stuff. So we've been talking a lot about ministry in Scotland, the Scottish Bible Society. So you get Bibles for Bairns, and you've got this Bible reading, cover to cover Bible reading, trauma stuff. Other things that we should know for
Scotland,
Scottish Bible Society in Scotland.
Yeah, definitely. Must know Bible stories. So this is free to download resources for teachers, but often pastors who are in schools will use this material as well. 5 stories from the Old Testament, 5 from the New. They meet the curriculum for excellence, and they're in fact recommended by Education Scotland for RME, religious and moral education, in our primary schools. And every day we get hundreds of downloads from teachers who don't have faith but are looking for good resources to use in RME in schools. And we've recently launched one on outdoor play. That's one of the big things in education. How do you get the kids outside post-COVID? How do you do things outside that help cover the curriculum, but also cover the Bible? That is a free resource, and it is staggering seeing the difference that it makes. And we will also run in schools RME days. So we can run this in schools for teachers to see, and they can also have continual professional development. Everyone no longer has to just do your job. You've got to do training to do your job as well. So that helps schools to be able to get that done. But it also helps them see the material. And what the teachers just tell us is it works. We have children engaging with the Bible, and we hear a couple of things after every time this resource goes out. The kids say, can we hear some more stories from the Bible, please? And the pupils and the teachers are saying, where can I get a Bible? That's just amazing. So that resource is phenomenal.
What's it called? I was trying to write it down.
Must know Bible stories.
Must know. It
was originally called 10 must know Bible stories, 5 from the Old Testament, 5 from the New, but we want to go beyond 10 because there's a lot of great more stories. But and particular focus on Jesus. So resource for primary schools that fits the curriculum for excellence, entirely free. And so Sue Thompson, who runs that work for us, she's based in Aberdeen. She's at conferences all the time with this, and she's recently been asked to help with this. They're looking at how we do RME around Scotland. And what's amazing is this is a conversation happening in Scottish government level. How can we ensure that religious and moral education is good in our schools? There is an open door. We have an opportunity. We'd love to be able to do something. They keep saying, can you help us in high schools? And we asked Education Scotland, what do you want for high schools? And they said, what we really want is Christians to come in and tell us what it means to be a Christian and the difference that faith makes to them. They effectively want Christians to come into schools and give their testimony, Brian. And this is Education Scotland asking for this. Please come and tell us about Jesus and the difference he's made in your life. No, we can't resource that at the moment. We'd love to find a way to be able to do that. So please pray for that. So that's Must Know Bible Stories.
Wow.
We have other resources. We talked about Bible overview. We have a guide that was taken from New Zealand called the Field Guide to the Bible. In that, it's a really short book. It gives an overview of the Bible. It gives an outline of each biblical book. It was produced for primary age kids in New Zealand. We produced it for Magnitude a couple of years ago for teens. And church leaders keep telling me they're using some of this post-alpha to hand to people as they read the Bible to say, here's a guide to help you read the Bible. And so
What's it called? I'm just writing this down again.
The Field Guide to the Bible. I'll pop one in the post to you, Brian. It's just a great resource. It asks these basic questions. How do I start reading the Bible? What's with all the numbers and verses? What's with the double columns? What are different ways to read the Bible going through? Given what we said about Bible reading, so there's lots of resources like that. Our magazine Gospels, which are great for outreach. People want to read the Bible, but the format of the Bible is unfamiliar. What about giving them a magazine, which is the full text of a gospel? So these initiatives are there. We also have a podcast, The Outspoken Bible, and alongside that, a number of audio resources. We've just released an audio drama called Ends of the Earth. So Fiona Stewart from Foolproof Media has put this together. It's an audio drama of the whole book of Acts. And it begins on the beach in Miletus with that farewell from Paul to the Ephesians leaders and talking to them. And then it goes through the whole of Acts, an audio drama for that. So creative ways to get into the Bible. Everything we are doing is trying to resource the church in Scotland. Everything we do is through churches to enable people to open the Bible for themselves and to encounter Jesus there and to equip people to do that. So these are some of the things that we're doing in Scotland.
I had no idea. I mean, this is just so incredible. I just now not just to Scotland, but from Scotland. What's the bullet points of from Scotland that Scottish?
So we're a part of a family of Bible societies that spans the world. I always say we're in more countries than McDonald's, but with a fraction of the budget. We're entirely dependent upon donations. We work through the church. So everything we do in every country, we're saying to the church, what are your Bible needs? And so we do three main things, Bible side front. We do Bible translation, getting the Bible into languages. As I said, less than about half the world's languages, don't even have a single book of the Bible in their own language. About 10% have the whole Bible. So translation is still a huge issue around the world, and we forget that. So we raise funds from Scottish churches to say, help us get the Bible into a language that people understand. The second thing we do is Bible distribution. The biggest reason that people around the world don't have the Bible is because they're too poor. Or can't get it. There's restrictions. So we're currently raising funds for Cuba. They're very restricted getting Bibles into Cuba, but they've got this opportunity again to get some Bibles in. And so saying to people, would you pay for a Bible to get into another country, into Cuba? But China, for example, rural China, so much poverty there, so many people living on less than a dollar or so a day, too poor to afford a Bible and maybe have come to faith. And for many Christians around the world, that's the reality. And they know Jesus, but don't have a Bible of their own. And we can give it to them. So again, we raise funds to enable that to happen. So Bible translation, Bible distribution, and finally Bible engagement, which is really what our conversation today has all been about. You've got the Bible in your own language. You've got it in your hands. How do we read this in a way that we meet Jesus and that it brings it to life? So all Bible societies around the world are doing that. So just one story. I was speaking to someone the other week. I didn't even realize we had a Bible society in Somalia. Somalia.
Okay.
And he was telling me about running trauma healing there because pastors there had seen their families beheaded by militants because of converting to faith. And he says, and despite that, 100 people a day are coming to faith in Jesus Christ in Somalia. And they have got these camels, and they strap wardrobes to the side of these camels with a library of books, and they go out into the deserts and they take these Bibles and use them to teach people who are largely illiterate among the camel herders to read the Bible. And then as they're doing that, people are coming to faith. So they're learning to read using the Bible, and they come to faith and they meet Jesus there. And so they're buying camels, buying a bunch of books, slapping the wardrobes on the camels, taking them out into the desert, and they give their lives to living among these camel herders. So they can, that was just one story. And you hear stories like this from around the world and think of people who are, their lives are at such risk sharing the Bible, and yet they're still doing it despite the losses. And then you say, hang on a minute, shouldn't I be a little bit bolder? So one of the things that I always say to people, we need to have a vision of what God is doing around the whole world, and that's what Bible Society work does. One of our best things we have is a prayer guide. You get it. Read and pray. So every day you can learn about something. Each week is a different theme. And you can pray around the world all through the year and hear story after story after story of what God is doing in the world through Bible, through people discovering the Bible in their language the first time. I have colleagues who've been in different parts of the world and they've given a Bible to someone in their language the first time. And inevitably what happens is that person takes the Bible and turns away and opens it and
Mm.
starts reading and discovers the realities that, hey, God speaks my language. and then stories of Bible distribution of what it is for Christians around the world who receive a Bible in their own language, and then hearing stories of what happens when people, having read the Bible, the difference that it makes. Just incredible stories. So you need to have that global perspective. We need to have the national perspective. That's what you and Peter are doing so well, gathering leaders together and saying, what's the story in Scotland? What's happening here? What's God to encourage one another? We need to have our local, local stories. You connect so well with leaders across the country. You'll know what's happening in Glasgow. I'm here in Edinburgh. Church leaders here connect in Edinburgh. Because otherwise, if we try to judge what God is doing around the world by just what's happening in my church, what's our perspective on that? Is that of what the God of the universe is doing in the whole wide world? So we need stories of encouragement from around the world, from around our nation, from our city, and we need to share these. And that's one of the things you're doing so spectacularly on this podcast, Brian. I can't thank you enough for it. But these are the things, and so that's Bible Society work: Bible translation, Bible distribution, Bible engagement.
So no doubt people are inspired. No doubt. Like just,
Well,
I
I
mean,
hope so.
I'm fired up. I'm fired up listening to this. And so if people want to be involved, if they want to support, suppose they go to the website and like, yeah, I want to start
Yeah, yeah,
donating and
yeah.
like advancing this kingdom work financially. Any other
Uh,
ways that people can
yeah.
get involved?
Absolutely. Pray. So we always say pray. That's the number one. If you can pray for us, there's opportunities to volunteer, to be involved. Maybe in your church, you want to start a Bible book group. Maybe you want to hand out our magazine. Maybe you want to do these things. There's volunteering opportunities where you are to get involved in this work and hear and see more of it and to be an advocate for it. But financially too, we depend entirely upon giving. And one of the best ways to do that is through our Share the Bible partnership. It used to be called Bible a Month. So for just £5 a month, you can have a standing order set up, and every month you will put a Bible in someone's hands around the world in a different country, and you'll know what country that is, and we'll tell you a little bit about that country. So that's really easy to set up. And if you want to do 10 Bibles, £50 a month, if you're wealthy enough to be able to afford that, you can do 10 Bibles a month. You can do that as a church. We have a church down in Dalkeith, a Full Gospel Church, and they have a Sunday every month where from the kids' work all the way through, they eat the food of the country that we're supporting that month, and they have a sense of a festival around that. And then the whole church is talking about it. This is the country we're sending Bibles to, and this church then donates, and all of those Bibles go to that country that month. So
Wow.
what a way! And then one of those months is always Scotland. So supporting financially and just a standing order, that's often the easiest way to do it. You know that you're partnering with us in getting the Bible out there, a different country every month, and 1 month of every year. That is Scotland, and that you're making a difference here as well. So pray, volunteer, and give. And I when I'm at events and things, I bump into people, and someone will say to me, "Oh, I'm a Bible a month partner. I've been doing this for 30 years."
Wow.
And you say, "Wow, 30 years, 12, 12 times a year. That's an amazing number of Bibles that have gone out." And many of these people
Yeah.
are giving generously multiple Bibles a month. So it's just this extraordinary opportunity to partner with the Lord in this work of getting the Bible out into the world, a world which is hungry for the Bible, a church which is hungry for the Bible. I think that's one of the staggering things, Bible poverty. Christians around the world that don't have the Bible, and they long for one. And yet here we are, as we're talking, I've got 5, 10, 15 on my shelf, and I struggle to find time to read it. If you're just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got them right behind me here on the
Yeah.
screen. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow, Adrian, I'm fired up. That was fantastic. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining and just talking about all this great stuff that your love for the Word, your journey, and Scottish Bible Society and what it's doing. I mean, I just every time this is now our second time of chatting, and I'm just mind blown about all the great stuff that you guys are doing. So
Yeah. Well,
blessings on that.
thank you as well, and thanks for having me here. And we continue to pray for you at Rehope, all that
Thanks.
you and Kelly leadership are doing. This is an amazing group of churches, and I've always wanted to hear more from you about how you're reaching out. One of the things we're always saying, as we're kind of accidental publishers. The stuff we come up with, publishing wise, magazine, gospels, these different things, is because church leaders are saying to us, "This is what's happening on the ground. You got to help us with a resource for this."
Hmm.
So that sense of hearing your stories, hearing what God is doing among you, we're always learning. Everything I do is learning from the church and hearing from the church in Scotland. What do we need for this moment for the Bible? So if there's church leaders listening today and they're thinking, "I got an idea, this is what we need," please, wherever you are in Scotland, for the furthest north to the furthest south, east, and west, I will come for a coffee, pick up the phone, because church leaders on the ground, you're seeing what God is doing, and we need to hear from you as a Bible society what it is that we need for this moment so that we can get the word into hands and hearts in Scotland. So bless you for all you're doing and all your team. I always remember you with joy, as Paul writes in his letters, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. We began talking about that meeting we had last year, and for both of us, what a joy, what a discovery it was of so much shared. So I'm just so glad for your partnership in the gospel and for all the Lord is doing through Rehope.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, just it's exciting just to have this connection.
Yeah,
Blessings on you and everybody. Thank you for
yeah.
listening. We will have Pete back soon. When he's done being awesome out there, he'll come back and spend time with us. But blessings, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye. Yeah.
We hope that you enjoyed today's episode of the Brian and Pete podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share with a friend and be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Brian is the pastor of Rehope Church, a multi-site church that started in Glasgow. He is also the founder of Scotland Bible School, a 3-year Bible school where students study every book of the Bible. Pete is the pastor of City on a Hill, a multi-site church across Edinburgh and the Lothians. He also leads Go Global, a family of hundreds of churches spanning 17 countries. If you'd like to submit a question to Brian and Pete, please email brianandpetepodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to having you join us for next week's episode.